So, I wanted to spend a bit of time talking about ineffective coping mechanisms for stress. Now, the reason why we need to understand ineffective coping mechanisms is so you can potentially spot them within yourself. Because at the end of the day, the reasons why we've effectively created these ineffective coping mechanisms is because we didn't know better, right? Like, to put this into context, think about a time where you were sat down saying, this is why we have stress, this is how it feels, and this is what you can do about it. Now, if you're like me and the vast majority of my clients, you never had that as an experience. So more often than not, you've probably come across a stressful situation, whether that was in childhood, teenage years, as an adult, whatever it was, and created a coping mechanisms to help you get through that situation. Now, you might not be aware that it's ineffective. However, we've all done it. We're all guilty of it. Now, one of the biggest things that I talk to my clients about is better understanding our current coping mechanisms to stress and really understand, is it serving us or is it holding us back? And this is something that I really wanted to talk about today. So today we're going to look at the 8 most common ineffective coping mechanisms that I see as a stress and burnout coach. Number 1 is avoidance. Now, obviously, if you're sitting there thinking about stress, you're trying to figure out how you can avoid stress. I totally get it. However, sometimes when we're avoiding stress or we're avoiding situations with stress, it can really, really hold us back. And this can be a completely vast scale, right? So you could be avoiding doing something that makes you feel uncomfortable, but it'd be really good for you in the long term. So maybe taking on a new challenge, or maybe, going for that job that you might feel like you're not qualified for, or whatever it is, you're having to build a new skill, whatever it is, right? That avoidance is going to hold us back. On the other side of that scale is maybe you're avoiding making a decision or avoiding making a choice to get yourself out of a situation that's actually causing more stress. And it could be because of fear or a lack of comfort or a lack of confidence, whatever it is. And those things can really be ineffective coping mechanisms, especially if it's keeping you in the same spot and you really need to move from that spot. Number 2, I'm sure we all know this one, but escapism. Now, escapism is something that a lot of us can use, especially when we feel really, really uncomfortable. So think about a time where you've been really, really stressed out and you're just like, I need to take my mind off it. So you go on social media and you start scrolling through TikToks, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is, or maybe you start watching Netflix, or maybe you start playing video games to keep your mind off that stress. Now, what that's doing, it's preventing you from making a decision or actively working on yourself to get out of that stress or resolve that stressful situation. And again, escapism, really similar to avoidance, is it's essentially keeping you in the same situation, but it's that instant gratification. You feel safe right now. However, in the long term, it's not making you any better. You're not really getting past that situation, and you're keeping yourself in the same situation. That's, again, keeping you in that stress response. Number 3 is what I would call distractions. So distractions and escapism can kind of go together. However, when I'm looking at distractions, I'm thinking about how you distract yourself from coping with your own stress. So for instance, a really, really common one that I see time and time again is when someone's dealing with something really, really stressful within their own life, whether it's at work, whether it's home, whatever it is. And what they do is they then start distracting themselves with other people's issues and other people's problems. So instead of resolving their own problems, they become a massive advocate of trying to help other people and resolve other people's problems rather than working on themselves. That's one way I've seen distractions work. And again, it can be the same again with like the escapism. So they can kind of tie in together. But I wanted to sort of bring that more to the forefront because I see that so often with so many people that really do want to solve their own problems, but don't feel like they have the skills to deal with it. So they then sort of insert themselves into other people's problems. Number 4, polishing a turd. Or that's what I call it, or otherwise you can look at it as toxic positivity. Now, there's been this massive movement since the noughties where we want to just be focusing on all the positives, right? Now, the dilemma with just focusing on the positives, although it sounds really great if something bad's happening, just focus on the positives in your life, it'll make you feel better. Focus on all the good things rather than the bad things. It sounds like great advice. However, if you are constantly polishing a turd or engaging in too much toxic positivity towards yourself, it prevents you from getting out of stressful situations. So a really great way to think about it is the meme with the dog sitting in the room that's all got fire everywhere and he's just drinking his coffee and he's saying, I'm fine. And the way that I describe it is just imagine, your house is on fire, right? Like every part of your house is on fire. And instead, of focusing on putting out that fire. You look out your window and you actually are focusing on, well, at least my neighbor's house isn't on fire. That doesn't make sense. So if you're constantly polishing a turd, if you're constantly focusing on just the positives and not focusing on any of the negatives to get yourself out of situations or to deal with problems, like, for instance, putting boundaries in place, leaving a relationship, whatever it is, it's going to keep that stressful situation ongoing, right? And another way that I always look at that is if 95% of your life is on fire and you're just focusing on the 5%, that will catch up with you. Number 5 is procrastination. Now, I have always said that I will die on this hill, that procrastination comes from stress. So think about a time when you've had maybe a to-do list the length of your arm, or you've had a really big project that you've got to undertake, or maybe you've got something that you've been avoiding doing because it's going to take a lot of time, effort, energy, whatever it is. So you start procrastinating, you start thinking about all the things you could be doing, you start thinking about it nonstop. So you start procrastinating, right? Essentially, this is an ineffective coping mechanism for stress, right? What you're doing is you're keeping yourself in that situation, but the more you procrastinate about it, the longer it's going to take you to resolve that problem. So it's really important to understand if you're using procrastination, it's taking a step back, going, okay, I'm feeling a little bit stressed out. I'm using this as a coping mechanism. It's really not effective because it's keeping me in the same situation. So it's finding ways to break that procrastination. And I promise you, I will be doing a video on this in the coming weeks. Number 6, the blame game. Now, we've all been guilty of this. So we've been in a situation that's extremely stressful. Maybe it involves somebody else. Maybe something crazy has happened at work or at home or whatever it is. And instead of having the skills or the resources or the capabilities or the capacity to deal with that stress, instead of actually doing that, we end up pointing the finger at somebody else, going, I'm stressed out because of that person. Or I'm stressed out because of you. I'm stressed out because the house isn't cleaned. I'm stressed out because you're not helping me. I'm stressed out because of whatever it is. And you start blaming somebody else for the reason of your stress rather than taking accountability and responsibility of your own decisions and your own choices. This one is a really, really hard one to break because it makes us feel really uncomfortable. And sometimes we are genuinely in situations that might be created by somebody else, but we have to take our responsibility of the situation that we're in and our choices in that situation, right? And our responses to that situation. But we've all been guilty of the blame game. We've all pointed fingers because we felt really overwhelmed because we wanted to move that blame from ourselves to other people. And maybe essentially there's no reason for that blame. However, we typically do it because we don't have the skills or the resources or the capacity to deal with it. Number 7 is overworking. Now, it's similar to that distraction and that escapism in a way, but I kind of wanted to create its own category because it comes with its own issues and its own fallouts. So a lot of the times when we can feel really stressed out, maybe something crazy is happening in our home life, or maybe we're feeling down about ourselves, whatever it is, we're feeling stressed out. So what do? We want to try and find some kind of control. One of those control things is how we work. Work is one of those situations where we can do A, B, C, D and know we're going to get a result at some stage, right? And we can also get positive reinforcement. So we might throw ourselves into work as a distraction, as a way to make ourselves feel better, as a way of that instant gratification because it's something we can 100% control. A lot of the times when we're feeling stressed out, we can't control this. We can't control that situation, right? But we can definitely control our work. I typically see this in the type A professionals, the overachievers, the high achievers, all of that kind of stuff. But I wanted to put it into its own category because this is something that a lot of people do. And not only is it an ineffective coping mechanism to make themselves feel better, so maybe it's actually building up their confidence, maybe they're tying work to their self-worth because maybe they're so stressed out, they haven't been able to deal with it. And so they've got low self-confidence, low self-worth, but when they work, they tie it into that sort of self-worth and, achievement side. The dilemma with doing that is it's kind of a slippery slope because you can end up getting on a hamster wheel that you can't get off. Because if you slow down on the hamster wheel, then you start getting intrusive thoughts and you start having to deal with all the stressful situations that you've maybe been avoiding dealing with, right? And so it's a really slippery slope with that one. So I'm going to do a bit more work on that one because I think, or a couple more videos, not work, but a couple more videos on that because I think it's really important to unpick and really understand. And number 8 is substance abuse. Sometimes when we feel really stressed out or when some people feel really stressed out and they don't have the coping mechanisms or effective coping mechanisms that they've dealt, they might lean on substance abuse, whether that is alcohol or illicit drugs, or even just caffeine, or even just smoking cigarettes and things like that. It is an effective coping mechanism because, again, it's that instant gratification that can make you feel better in that moment, but it might actually be either keeping you in a stressful situation or making those situations significantly worse. So if you are struggling with substance abuse, please reach out to any resources that you have. I'll link some down below so you have some resources if you are struggling with substance abuse. But it's something that we have to be aware of as well. Now, here's the thing with ineffective coping mechanisms. A lot of the times, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get ourselves out of stressful situations, and sometimes avoiding the situation, or, pointing the blame on somebody else, or procrastinating, or overworking, or distracting ourselves, or whatever it is. It can make us feel safe and comfortable in that moment. However, the biggest dilemma with it is it's keeping us in that situation or making the situation significantly worse. And so this is why I always say to people, when you're looking at your stress response and you're thinking about the ways that you deal with stress, a lot of the times it can be from the subconscious, and becoming a little bit more self-aware of, actually, how do I deal with stress? What are some of my stress responses? And then going forward from that and asking yourself, is there something that's serving me and helping me move forward, helping me solve the problem, helping me just be a better person moving forward? Or is it actually limiting me or holding me back? When you can really start understanding that, it can be really helpful, because that way you can actually start actively choosing different responses to stress. All right, so if you want a little bit more information about what I do, please head over to my website, which is in the link below. I've also got the Get Your Shit Together membership, where we talk a lot about breaking ineffective coping mechanisms and making sure that we're developing healthy coping mechanisms. So if you want to check that out, look at the link below. We've also got a burnout score. So if you're not sure how stress is impacting you, please take the burnout score there as well, so you can have an understanding about where you're currently at. And if you do need any more information, please just reach out to me. I'm always happy to answer a question.